Hello, my fifth grade friends. This is Mrs. Smith. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the topic of dividing decimals when there is a decimal divisor. So just to review really quick, the parts of a division problem, all right? We'll just say this is 14 and 6/10. Okay, this part right here in the division problem is the dividend. Okay, and then the number on the outside of the division problem, like 2/10, that's the divisor. And of course, the answer, whatever we get up here at the top, is the quotient. All right, now this is new for us. Well, not really new because we learned about it already, but this is new to fifth graders because we've never had an issue where there's a decimal in the divisor. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to do that in just a minute. So now that we know the parts of a division problem or reviewed it, I want to review our strategy. Now, if you remember from yesterday, our strategy is long division. And the reason why is we need to sometimes add zeros to make our decimal computation work out correctly, okay? You can't have a remainder. They don't like that. So long division is our strategy because sometimes we have to add numbers. And if we're using partial quotient, that's going to really mess us up. So the steps for long division, first step is to divide. D for divide. Second step, M, means multiply. Third step, S, subtract. Fourth step, B, which means bring down the next number. And then you just repeat until you are done with your division computation. All right, so let's talk about decimal division. All right, so I'm going to share with you an anchor chart, and I want to pay attention to the bottom half of the anchor chart. Okay, so here's my anchor chart for decimal division. So the top one goes over what we talked about yesterday. If there's a decimal in the house, meaning in the dividend, you raise the decimal to the roof. Okay, just like yesterday, we just popped it up on the top and divided like normal. What I want to pay attention to right here is if there's a decimal on the side, and by side I mean divisor, you slide. And I'm going to show you what that means in a moment. And then at the bottom here, I just want to remind you, remember when dividing decimals, they don't like you. You can't have a remainder. You need to add or annex, there's that word I talked about, zeros until you divide it out evenly, get to a logical place value, meaning stop at the third place value, or find a repeating pattern, which we know what repeating decimals are. So we're going to talk about this idea of slide, all right? So I'm going to start off with a problem. I'm going to start off with a problem of, and this is going to be my example problem, 37 and 68/100ths, 37 and 68/100ths divided by 0 and 6/10. All right, so the first thing I want to notice right here is that I have a decimal divisor, okay? And so I need to make this 6/10 a whole number. So I need to make my divisor 6. Now, when dealing with decimals, okay, in order to make a decimal a bigger number, we're going to multiply. And to make it a smaller number, we would divide, but we are always going to want to make our divisor bigger than what it is. So I want to make this 6/10 into 6 wholes. And so what I need to do is I need to multiply my 6/10 by 10. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to move my decimal point one space over. So I'm going to show you what I mean. 0 and 6/10 times 10 equals 6. Okay, so I'm sliding it over, the decimal one space over, and making my divisor 6. Now, if you slide it on the side, you have to slide it on the inside. So whatever you do, you have to balance out your question. So if I move my decimal point one place over to the right for my divisor, I need to do the same thing for my dividend. And I'm going to show you how that works out. If I multiplied by 10 here, I'm going to take my dividend and I'm going to multiply that by 10 here. And I'll show you what I get. So 37 and 68/100 times 10. It works out to be 376 and 8/10. Okay, and so how did that work? If I moved it one space to the right up here, I move it one space to the right here, and now my decimal is between the 6 and the 8. Okay, that's the background behind it. But what we're going to do is we're going to know to move it one space to the right and move the decimal one space to the right in the dividend. So my new problem is going to be 6 divides into 376 and 8/10. And so now I'm just going to divide it like I did yesterday. I'm going to pop my decimal to the top and divide it out like normal. 6 cannot divide into 3. Now remember, I have 4 digits here. I better have 4 digits up on top. 6 cannot divide into 3, so that's 0 times 6 is 0. I subtract, so I'm left with 3. Bring down the 7. 6 divides into 37 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. I subtract, I'm left with 1. Bring down the 6. 6 divides into 16, 6, 12, 18, that would be 2 times. 2 times 6 is 12. I subtract, I'm left with 4. Bring down my 8. And 6 divides into 48, 8 times. 6 times 8 is 48, and I am left with 0. Okay, so my quotient is 62 and 8/10. Okay, so I'm going to show you another one like this and a few others, and then I'm going to give you like 1 or 2 to do on your own, and then you can check with me. Okay, so my next problem, let's see here. Let's do, let's do number 2. Let's do 0 and 288 thousandths divided by 0 and 9/10. Okay, so I'm going to slide my decimal to the right one space right here to make my divisor 9. And I'm going to slide my decimal right here to make my number 2 and 88/100. Okay, so I had a 0 here, but when I move the decimal over, I make 2 my whole number and 88/100 my decimal part, so I don't need that 0 anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and divide like normal. Raise the decimal to the roof and divide like normal. 9 cannot divide into 2, so that would be 0 times. 0 times 9 is 0. I subtract, I'm left with 2. Bring down the 8. 9 divides into 28 3 times. 3 times 9 is 27. I subtract, I'm left with 1. And I bring down the 8. And 9 divides into 18 2 times. 9 times 2 is 18. It works out to be 0. Okay, so So that's an example where you only have one digit behind the decimal in your divisor. So your divisor is in the tenths. But what happens if your divisor is in the hundredths place? So let's talk. Number 3. Let's see how we do this. Number 3. Let's do 4 366 thousandths. Divided by 0 and 5 hundredths. Okay, so just like I did up here, I'm going to move my decimal point over. But instead of it moving 1 space, it's going to move over 2 spaces. So my divisor is going to become 5. In this example, instead of multiplying it by 10, I would multiply it by 100. Because if I move it over 2 spaces, I have 2 zeros. So whatever I do to the outside, I must do to the inside. So I'm going to move it over once, I'm going to move it over twice, and now my number is going to be 436 and 6/10. So that's my new division problem. Pop my decimal up on the top and divide like normal. I have 4 digits here, I better have 4 digits up here in my quotient. 5 cannot divide into 4, so that's 0. 0 times 5 is 0. Subtract, I'm left with 4. Bring down the 3. 5 divides into 43 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. And I'm left with 3. Bring down the 6. 5 divides into 36 7 times. 7 times. And let's see here. 7 times 5 is 35. I'm left with 1. Bring down the 6. 5 divides into 16 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm left with 1. Now, do you remember, boys and girls, on the anchor chart it says here, remember when dividing decimals, you can't have a remainder. Add zeros until you divide it out evenly. I can't leave this 1 here. So I'm going to have to add a 0 to my dividend. Doesn't change its value. It just gives me another number to divide into. And I know that 5 can divide into 10 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. I subtract, I'm left with 0. So this is a great example of why we use long division, because if we were using partial quotient, we would not be able to do this problem properly. Okay, so this is an example where I have a divisor with 2 digits. Okay, and so for my final example, I'm going to show you what happens when you have a whole number as your dividend. Okay, so I am going to say that my problem is problem number 4. Make sure you can see it. Okay, problem number 4. We're going to have 0 and 11 hundredths divided into 33. All right, now this was a killer question on the decimals test. You were given, I think it was like 28 divided by 0 and 4/10. And everybody picked 7. Okay, pay attention because this is a killer question. All right, so I have 2 digits behind the decimal here. So I'm going to move my decimal point over 2 spaces to make my new dividend 11. Now, if I do this to the divisor, I need to do this to the dividend. But, oh, Lord, boys and girls, there's no decimal point Where is my decimal point? Well, let's stop and think. 33 is a whole number. So that means if this is a whole number, my decimal point is right there. So I need to move it over 1 space, 2 spaces. So what can I put here that would fill in the gaps? Well, we're going to go ahead and put some zeros in there. So my new dividend is going to be 3,300. So let's talk. Let's divide it out. My decimal is going to go right here at the end, so I'll pop it up on the top. And let's divide it out. 4 digits here, I better have 4 digits here. All right, 11 cannot divide into 3, so that's 0. 11 times 0 is 0. Bring down, or subtract, and I'm left with 3. Bring down the 3. 11 divides into 33 3 times. 3 times 11 is 33. I subtract, I'm left with 0. Oh, I'm done. But wait a minute. I still have 2 numbers right here that I have to fill in. I'm not done. Bring down my other 0. 11 divides into 0, 0 times. 0 times 11 is 0. Subtract, I'm left with 0. Bring down my last 0. 0 divides into 0, 0 times. 0 times 11 is 0. I'm left with 0. So my answer is not 3 where I wanted to stop. It wasn't 30. It was actually 300. And that is a really good example. All right, so here's what I'm going to do, boys and girls. I'm going to give you 3 problems that I'd like for you to solve on your own, okay? And then you can pause the video and then watch how I solve it, okay? So let's see here. Okay, I don't want to give you something that you've already done. So, okay, all right, here we go. All right, so let's see here. Here's your practice. All right, number 1, I just don't want to repeat something I've already done. Let's see here. Okay, let's go ahead and do this problem right here. It's going to be 1 and 888 thousandths divided by 0 and 8 tenths. Number 2, your problem's going to be 747 thousandths, 0 and 747 thousandths divided by 0 and 3 hundredths. And your final problem is going to be number 3, 2 and 472 thousandths divided by 1 and 2 tenths. So go ahead and pause your video, and when you're ready, press play to see how or what the answer should be. Pause your video now. All right, ladies and gents, let's go ahead and go over these answers. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do to number 1 is make my divisor a whole number. And I do that by multiplying by 10 or sliding my decimal to the right. So 8 is my divisor. And then whatever I do to the outside of my house, I have to do to the inside. So I'm going to bring that decimal point over. And so now my new dividend is going to be 18 and 88 hundredths. All right, now I'm going to divide it out like normal. Pop your decimal up to the top. And I have 4 digits in my dividend. I better have 4 digits up here. Starting with the 1. 8 cannot divide into 1. 8 times 0 is 0. Subtract. I'm left with 1. Bring down the 8. 8 divides into 18. 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. I subtract, I'm left with 2. Bring down the 8. Now it's 28. 8 divides into 28 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. I subtract, I'm left with 4. And I bring down, oh, this should have been this 8 right here. Bring down my last 8. And 8 divides into 48 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. And I'm left with 0. So your answer to number 1 should have been 2 and 36 hundredths. Number 2, I want to make my divisor a whole number. And so in order to do that, I'd have to multiply it by 100 or slide my decimal over 2 spaces to the right, making my dividend or my divisor 3. And whatever I do to the outside of my house, I need to do to the inside of my house. So 1, 2. So now my dividend is now going to be 74 and 7/10. And now I'm going to divide it out. 3 divides into 7 2 times. Oh, wait, whoops, boop, 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 boop. Rewind. Pop that decimal up on the top. If I don't do that, I'm going to forget where it goes. Now let's try it again. 3 divides into 7 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. I subtract, I'm left with 1. Bring down the 4. 3 divides into 14 4 times. 4 times 3 is 12. Subtract, I'm left with 2. Bring down the 7. 3 divides into 27 9 times. 9 times 3 is 27. I'm left with 0. So the answer to number 2 is 24 and 9/10. Alrighty. And number 3. Alrighty. Number 3. Actually, yeah, I'll leave it as number 3. All right, number 3, I want to make this 1 and 2/10 into 12. And so I'm going to multiply that by 10, making or sliding my decimal to the right 1 time, making my divisor 12. And then whatever I do to the outside, I do to the inside. So now my divisor is going to be 24 and 72 hundredths. And so now I'm going to divide it out like normal. 12 cannot divide into, oh wait, decimal. Mrs. Smith is having a hard time tonight. 12 cannot divide into 2, so that's 0. 0 times 12 is 0. Subtract, I'm left with 2. Bring down the 4. 12 divides into 24 2 times. 2 times 12 is 24. Left with 0. Bring down the 7. 12 divides into 7, I cannot do, so that's going to be 0. 0 times 12 is 0. I'm left with 7. Bring down the 2. And then 6 times 12 is 72, so it's going to be 6 and 72, and you subtract, you're left with 1. And so my answer to number 3 is 2 and 6 hundredths. All right, I want to give you one more though, boys and girls, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and give you one more that I'd like for you to do. Okay, and that one is going to be, it's going to be this one right here. So I want you to just kind of follow along and do it with me. It's going to be 0 and 2/10 divided into 132. Okay, so in order to make my 2/10 into 2 wholes, I'm going to multiply them by 10 or move the decimal to the right 1 time. So whatever I do to the outside, I need to do to the inside of my house, right? So right here, this is a whole number. So here's my decimal. I need to move it over 1 space. And so now my divisor is going to, or dividend is going to be 1,320 divided by 2. 2 divides into 1 0 times. 0 times 2 is 0. Subtract. Left with 1. Bring down the 3. 2 divides into 13 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. Subtract. I'm left with 1. Bring down the 2. 2 divides into 12 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. I'm left with 0. Bring down my final 0. 2 divides into 0 0 times. 0. So the answer is 660. Oh, 660. And that is just an example of what to do when you are dividing with a whole number dividend and you don't know what to do with your decimal. There are some problems that I'd like for you to try. So go ahead and work through those and snap a picture and send it to me. As always, thanks for watching. And if you are completely lost and you don't know what to do, reach out to me and I will help you. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.